Okay, so if you take a look at anything I make, you can pretty easily deduce that I love fantasy. And a couple of years ago, I discovered a little something called Dungeons and Dragons, and I got obsessed. But I didn't have anyone to play with. Until the day a dear friend of mine invited me to join a very simple and short campaign, and we've been playing that same campaign for 4 years now. And during that time, I designed and illustrated many characters for D&D and other TTRPGs, but I have never really finished my own character design. And we have just leveled up to level 13, which means this campaign is ending. And I need a character design before this campaign ends. So that's what we are doing today. We are designing slash redesigning my first ever D&D character. So let's get started. Character design is all about story, so why don't we take a look at Nova's background. Nova is a little tiefling who is also a draconic bloodline sorcerer, and she was born and raised in a traveling circus, until the tragic day the circus was set on fire and she lost pretty much everything, including her memory. Because of that, she ended up in the streets of Belding, a smithing city in the kingdom of Athos. There she met Coletta, a human girl in a similar condition as her, Vinia, a lovely halfling woman who always tried her best to help Coletta and Nova, and also Pius, who loved to make Nova's life a living hell. And he was also a member of the gang Martelo Sangrento, or Bloody Hammer. One day, Pius stole her flute, which was one of the few things she knew was hers. And because of that, she asked a cleric named Leonardo Angelus for help. She had just met him a couple of hours ago, but he actually decided to help her, and together they got the flute back. But Pius got really mad. Why? Just because I set his pants on fire? Yep, that was pretty much it, Nova. So because of that, Nova had to run away with Leo. She planned to stay with him just until she was strong enough to face Pius. But even after she managed to get a better control of her magic, she was still worried about not being strong enough. She accepted that she would probably never be able to go back. So she and Leo just kept traveling. During those travels, she ends up meeting Matling, a human fighter who is actually quite lucky, Clay, a changeling rogue who is also a follower of the Traveler, and Rhea, a kind but also brutal Aasimar paladin. And together they all make the Aludiprata. Also, Leo pretty much just adopted her as a daughter, kinda like Joe and Ellie, or Lee and Clementine, but without the apocalypse part. At least for now. Finding a new strength in those strands, she goes back to Belding. Things go horribly wrong, but in the end, they defeat Pius. She apologizes to Coletta, and now she travels the world getting to the craziest adventures with her friends, while also trying to recover her memories and find out what happened to her family. I am also trying to find my brother, who apparently is alive, and probably hates me for some reason. I'm also still learning to deal with the fact that I was actually born in the Nine Hells, and that everyone who ever told me to go to hell was way more accurate than they thought. I didn't really plan for a super tragic and complicated backstory, but I had no idea what to do for my first RPG character. I was so worried about writing a backstory, so I went with I have no memory and just let my DM fill up the blanks. The problem is, both me and my DM love to make our characters suffer, so Nova ended up with a lot more trauma. And I really love playing as her, and that's why this is such a big challenge for me. Regardless of how this campaign ends, I'll always have a space in my heart for Nova and her party. So now that we know who Nova is, let's talk about her character design. I've started with drawing her original design and taking a couple of notes on what I thought could be improved. I think that design is a little bit too generic, a little bit too simple. There are a lot of things that don't make a lot of sense because I didn't really think a lot about them, and she covers her scales a lot more than I want. Literally the main reason why I chose this subclass is because pretty scales. The design makes sense for a level 1 character, especially considering that Nova did not have any money at all to spend on clothes, but it can be a lot better. So I used it as a base and started to sketch a bunch of ideas. I knew I wanted her clothes to be very flowy and comfortable, because, well, she's a caster, so she needs to be able to move very freely. I also wanted her to look like a very powerful sorcerer, and also she doesn't really mind the attention, so I want to show more of her scales and have more colorful clothes with a bunch of accessories and details. I also knew I had to include her Storyteller robes, which is a very cool custom item my DM made me that is also based on the Archimagi Robes of the Archimagi, also known as this little item that I cannot pronounce the name. He is making a custom item for every single player and all of them are very cool. I'm also illustrating my boyfriend's item, so I need to include those robes somehow. I thought it would take me a lot longer to find a design that I like it, but because I had the robes and I knew more or less what kind of clothes I wanted, I had a good set of constraints to work around, so this base design process was actually very easy and fun. My initial plan was to just do one design, but I could not resist and not do a little level by level thing. So for her first level, she did not have any resources, just a bunch of things she managed to gather during her previous adventures. She's very afraid of people trying to get her magic away again, that's also why she hides her scales, but she still likes to wear a little bit of color and shiny things. For her low levels, she still does not have a lot of resources, but she is a bit more comfortable with herself and her magic. For her mid-levels, she has a lot more resources, she is a lot more confident in herself and her magic, and also she finally got a horror prosthetic at some point. I don't really remember if they were in the mid-levels, but it was at some point during the adventure. And no, I don't really know how her horn got broke. The me of 4 years ago thought it would be very cool to make her a lot more harder to draw, so that's why she does have a broken horn. And for her high/current levels, she is a very powerful sorcerer who is not afraid of who she is. I think the biggest jump is between the low and the mid levels, and that is because she was eaten alive by a giant fire snake. The giant fire snake was not evil, it was just a protective spirit of the forest called Boitata, who was being controlled by a weird unnatural force. We had a very cool and complicated combat, and somehow she got alive. So yeah, she had to buy some new clothes after that. I really love how this gives a very good idea of how Nova would have evolved and changed during her adventures in a very tangible way. And with that, we can move into the line art. For her line art, I was testing a new brush I'm creating for my brush pack. It's the same one I used for the sketch, and this is quickly turning into my default sketch brush, but I'm not sure if it's the best for line art, it's a bit too soft for it, but I'll keep testing and refining it before I include it on the pack. By the way, if you want to use the same brushes as me, I have a brush pack, and the link is on the description. And with the line art done, we can start working on what's usually one of my favorite steps on character design, but this time it was like fighting a Goristro with just a butter knife. So, I love colors and making color tests for character design, but I did not expect needing 21 of them to fight something that worked. My problem wasn't that I did not like the options, my problem was that I liked all of them too much. And it took me a lot of hours of me going insane and a lot of friends' opinions to decide to go with this one. Nova is at the same time proud and afraid of her fire. She is a tiefling and is very proud of that, but her family died in the fire, and she still doesn't really know if she is to blame for that. So red makes a lot of sense for her primary color. Also, the robes kinda needed to be red, because that's the item description. To make it feel a bit more magical, I added a slight tint of purple, both on the robes and on her shirt thing. I made the pants, boots and shoulder piece a very warm but still more neutral brown to complement the red, and I've also added some turquoise on her very big belt and a lot of golden details to work as accents. And to tie the whole design together, the inside of the robes are made of patches, kinda like a Gleeman's cloak from the Wheel of Time, which is also part of the item description and probably my favorite part of the item description. Like, I just think it looks visually so cool, and I really want anything that is made out of patches on the inside. And with her colors finally decided, I can start to add some... Oh wait, I forgot to design the golden details, didn't I? Yeah, so after having so much trouble with the colors, I thought the worst was over, but then the golden details came and they kicked my butt. It took me a while to find a design that I liked. I knew I wanted some moon and star motifs, maybe a sum somewhere because Leo is a pillar cleric, but in the end I decided to go with a compass with a moon in the middle, which makes a little reference to the friendship bracelets she got for all of her friends, because of course she did that. They are her North Star that points to the way home. It's very gay and I love it. For the belt, I went with a moon and I started with some leaves because I just thought it looked cute. Okay, now we can actually go to the rendering. For her rendering, I wanted to test a couple of things. I wanted to focus a bit less on shading and a bit more on adding texture, and I absolutely love how it turned out. I love how some artists uses scratches to imitate like how you would color something with pencil, and that is something I am trying to incorporate in my art, and I think it turned out super cute in this design. I also decided to make a back view and a casual clothes drawing because I really liked one of the design sketches, and I know the back view is a little bit wonky. I should have planned it a bit better, but it works with what I need now. I also took some time to properly design her horn jewelry, even though I really did not want to because I was getting tired of working on this, and horn jewelry is hard. I planned to do a lot more on this project, but I decided to be a little responsible goblin and I just focused on the base design and the rest I will do later. I'm also currently working on some party portraits, as you could see in the video, and that might also turn into a video as well if you guys like this type of video and like me rambling about my D&D party. And with all of that done, I think it's finally time for us to see the final results. This was probably one of the most difficult projects I've ever worked on. Not because of the technical things I had to do, but because how much this character means to me. And I loved how she turned out. There are a lot of things that I want to add to this later, but I'm just happy to have something finished. And if you want to see more character design fantasy nonsense, I made this video where I designed characters using dice. And as always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons for supporting me in making these videos. I hope you have liked this video and I hope to see you in another adventure. Bye!